Sometimes you load into a match of Call of Duty and you can instantly tell if a player is bad based on what weapon they're using. The Brecci from Black Ops 3, the Lewis from COD World War II, these are weapons that are pretty frequently used by bad players just trying to cheese kills. But what about the opposite? What about the guns that immediately show you somebody is good at the game? What's up, everybody? Non-AI Jimmy here today, and today we're going to talk about 20 guns from COD history that only good players used. So you let me know which of these guns you actually used in multiplayer. If you considered yourself a good player, drop a like on the video. And as always, guys, my debut book is available for pre-order on Amazon and Apple and every other website. I'll put a link in the description and the pinned comment. If you want to go pre-order, welcome to the family. I would truly appreciate it. At number 20 today, the XR2 in Black Ops 3. The 3-round burst rifle that was one of the, let's just be honest, one of the most underrated weapons in Black Ops 3, and it was a default unlock. Base damage, pretty high. And if you were using high caliber, you could get one burst kills from basically any distance. However, it wasn't a very popular weapon online due to the fact that the burst was really slow, and with how dynamic the movement was in Black Ops 3, it was kind of difficult to stay on target and get the most out of it. Plus, there was the simple fact that you were going to use, well, if you were going to use a burst rifle in BO3, you were using the M8A7. So if somebody was loading into the map with an XR2, you had to be careful because that meant they were super confident with that burst timing and they were going to be taking full advantage of that insane one burst kill range. The XR2 players, they were methodical, they were precise, and that made them terrifying to go up against. At number 19, the P06 in Black Ops 3. Speaking of burst weapons, I'm going to give a shout out to this one. Charged up, 3-round burst rifle. Hardly anybody used effectively, but some people were insane. The gun was super awkward due to the charge time after you pulled the trigger. You basically had to predict where your target was going to be 1 second after you pulled the trigger, which was extremely difficult to get the hang of. But once those 3 shots came out of the barrel, you were going to get some insane damage or on the field because every single one of those 3 bullets was capable of an insta-kill if you aimed high enough. Technically, one burst from the P06 could wipe out an entire enemy team. And there's some insane clips from the Black Ops 3 era. Go look it up. It was a super powerful gun if you took the time to dedicate and get really good at it, which not everyone was willing to do. If somebody was the other team spawning in with a P06, you were probably in trouble. At number 18, the Banshee in Black Ops 3. I know that's 3 Black Ops 3s in a row. I mean, the game had a few high-skill weapons, which is one of the reasons I love the game so much. The Banshee, super awkward energy shotgun. Would fire this little blue slug that would slowly travel across the map, meaning you had to lead your shots and predict where the enemy was going to be. But the payoff for that effort was the fact that it was a one-shot kill no matter what. It was literally impossible to get a hit marker with the Banshee because even if you hit the target in the pinky toe from 100 yards away with a suppressor equipped, they were going to drop the second the slug made contact. So it was a very rewarding gun to get good with, but hardly anybody wanted to do it because it was really hard to get good with. At number 17, 50 GS in Modern Warfare, all the reboots. It's the modern version of the Deagle. Even though I'm not much of a fan of the new Modern Warfare games, I'll admit their version of the Deagle is pretty crazy. The Deagle is portrayed as this super heavy but super powerful handgun, capable of an insta-kill to the head with pretty good range. And there's some players who took full advantage of that. This was definitely a gun that benefited from a mouse and keyboard as opposed to a controller, because if you were just trying to use it as a standard spammy handgun, not a shotgun, you weren't going to have a good time. Fire rate was low, recoil was nuts, but if you were good at flicking to people's heads and getting the insta-kill, it was arguably just as good as having a sniper in your back pocket. I mean, to me, 50 GS players were pretty intimidating. At number 16, the Kar 98K in Modern Warfare, the reboot. It's one of the guns that appeared the most times throughout COD history, and the 2019 version is probably the most beloved by the community. Now, unlike other cars in COD history, this one was classified as a marksman rifle instead of a sniper rifle, which meant it had pretty decent handling speeds, but it was also much lighter than a sniper rifle, which meant it didn't have a big one-shot kill range or, honestly, as steady of handling. But what it did have was a massive speed boost over the other bolt-action weapons, and that's what made it so popular in Modern Warfare. You could move super quickly with the gun. If you were trying to quick scope, it was your best friend. I mean, it's not to say it was easy to use, because like I said, great mobility was countered by a pretty small one-shot kill range, so you really had to be consistent with your aim. But people put in the work to get good with it. It's still one of the most beloved quick-scoping guns in COD history, despite being in a pretty widely hated game. At number 15 is the Widowmaker in Infinite Warfare. How many of you actually used it? Probably not very many. Not only was sniping super difficult in IW because the map design and the mobility options were crazy, but the Widowmaker, it was hard to get the hang of on top of it. It looked like the intervention for Modern Warfare 2, but it was a 2-round burst for some reason, which made it really hard to stay on target due to that recoil. But much like the P06 we talked about earlier in Black Ops 3, the Widowmaker could instantly drop its target with a single bullet, despite the fact that it fired multiple bullets at one time. So the few people who got good at sniping in 9W were putting up some insane gameplays and montages with the Widowmaker, because even though it was one of the hardest guns in the game to use, it also had some of the best potential for multi-kills and crazy clips. I hated the game, I'll admit though. Widowmaker clips, they were pretty hype. At number 14, the crossbow and everything. It was introduced to COD back in the original Black Ops, and ever since then it's been extremely high risk. It's been a high risk bonus weapon. Each version of the crossbow has its own quirks. None of them are easy to use, which is why it's always weirdly terrifying to go up against somebody using it. Some crossbows have bonus attachments, incendiary bolts, turn the target into a walking thermite grenade, or explosive tips that turn their target into a mini nuke if they happen to be on a hardpoint hill or a domination flag. But because of that slow travel time and the arc of the arrow, crossbow's hard to get used to. It's hard to get the hang of, and you only ever see it being used by genuinely good players. If you actually put hours into getting good with the crossbow, you're a freak in a good way. At number 13, the Pharaoh in Black Ops 3. This was a gun that I could not get the hang of, but there was a lot of people in the community, including competitive players, who insisted it was one of the best guns in the game because of how good it could be. Pharaoh was a 4-round burst SMG, basically functioned like a shrunken down version of the M8 assault rifle. Burst fire rate was pretty quick. Burst could get a near insta-kill if you hit all your shots, but the time between the burst is what got you in trouble. And if you weren't using or good at using burst weapons at close range, you were probably going to hate it. Most SMG players opted for a full auto weapon since they're a lot easier to use in close range encounters, but there was a lot of admittedly very skilled players who used the Pharaoh religiously back in the BO3 days. It was a demanding SMG, but that time to kill, it was one of the fastest in the game, so it definitely rewarded you for your efforts. At number 12, the Moors in Advanced Warfare. Sniping in Advanced Warfare was really hard because of how fast and how vertical the movement was. I mean, if somebody noticed you were aiming at them, all they had to do was hit the jump button twice and they would fly out of harm's way. So not only was the Moors a sniper rifle in a game where sniping is really hard, but it was also a single shot sniper where you had to wait 10 years in between your shots to reload. And that may be a bit of an exaggeration, but you get what I'm saying. The time between shots with this thing could get you in serious trouble if you weren't really consistent with your aim. Now granted, it was always a one-shot kill, so Sledgehammer made sure you were rewarded for getting really good with jetpack sniping mechanics, but this was a hard gun to use. Since we're talking about single shot guns in Advanced Warfare, let's segue into number 11, the RW1. Yeah, single shot railgun pistol. A lot of snipers would keep in their back pocket, which I thought was kind of funny because usually a pistol is meant to be your trusty spammy gun for firing a bunch of bullets at a weak enemy, but the RW1, it only had one shot loaded in at a time. That one shot was strong enough to kill whoever it touched. It was really hard to stay on target with a gun like this, but I do remember crazy clips that I saw back in the AW days of somebody going crazy with the Moors, and then they'd rotate to their RW1, and they go crazy with that. Not a handgun for everybody. It was a powerful tool if you were good at the movement of Advanced Warfare. At number 10, the MG34 in Modern Warfare 2019. You probably didn't expect to see an LMG on this list because LMGs are pretty much generally seen as low-skill weapons, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're literally designed to be guns that are easy to use and good at holding down objectives. But the MG34, it was an exception. This is a gun that had an insane time to kill, but so many drawbacks that could get you killed over and over again if you didn't compensate. The movement, it was horrible. The recoil, it was ridiculous. The ammo capacity, it was very limited, and it just didn't seem like a gun that was worth using. But when you break down the actual damage stats of the MG, you would see it's actually one of the fastest killing guns in the game. It was a sleeper gun because you had to be really careful about how you built it out and how you used it. But every once in a while, you'd come across somebody dominating the lobby with it because you were locked in with they were locked in with the MG34, and there was basically nothing the enemy team could do. It would kill you almost instantly. You rarely saw it online, but if you did, you paid attention. At number 9, we're going way back. The G3 and COD 4. In a game dominated by the M16 and the AK-74U, I think the G3 took a lot more effort to stand out. That being said, it's also one of the best semi-auto rifles in COD history, and it's a shame that not many of you probably remember it. This assault rifle had no fire rate cap, it had no recoil, and it would almost always kill in 2 bullets if you had SP on. Now, the theoretical time to kill on this, it was much faster than the M16, but in practice, you were almost never going to see that time to kill because it was semi-auto. Then again, G3 had a passionate following back in the COD 4 days, and then it developed another passionate following during the Modern Warfare Remastered era. Now, compared to other semi-auto rifles in COD history, I think it felt extra smooth. It was responsive, but it did take a little extra effort to get good with because you couldn't just run out the battlefield like you could with the M16 or the AK-74U. You had to be thoughtful. You had to think about your positioning. You had to think about what fights you were taking, but if you played smart, the TTK on the G3 was insanity. And number 8, the 410 Ironhide in Black Ops Cold. I'm not really sure why this gun was classified as a shotgun because it's more of a lever-action cowboy rifle, so naturally it did have a solid fire rate and good damage potential, but it had a really small opportunity for actually dealing the damage. You had to hit somebody high up on their body, and you had to be quick enough to get a follow-up shot in case your first bullet didn't get the one-shot kill. Plus, Black Ops Cold War had a pretty long time to kill, so if you got a hit marker you missed and let your target see where you were, they were almost certainly going to spray you with 1,000 bullets before you could line up that second shot. But if you could stay consistent, the 410 had some good handling speeds, had some really good potential for multi-kills and clips. Wasn't very popular because of how hard it was to use, but if you put in the time, I would call it underrated. At number 7, the M8A1 in Black Ops 2. Now, some people might have called it a cheap gun back in the day, but I think it's one of the most skill-based assault rifles of the classic COD era. 4-round burst, somewhat awkward burst delay that took some getting used to, but it was really easy to over-under judge the time between the burst on it. If you did that, it was going to result in a bad time for you. But if you got good at timing and stayed true to the gun's effective ranges, you could shred through the lobby. A good M8 player could get one burst kills in basically every scenario, but they had to be careful about how close they were getting to their targets and when they were reloading, because that reload animation was long, and if you were using fast mag, it wasn't, but yeah. It's one of the most iconic competitive weapons in COD history, and for good reason. Couldn't be effectively used by everyone, but if you put in the time and the work, this thing was your best friend, and it was your team's best friend. At number 6, the MK2 Carbine in Modern Warfare 2019. I still remember when this game came out and everybody was trying to get good with this thing, and then a few weeks later, everybody gave up and dropped it. Lever action rifle, very high fire rate, amazing handling speeds, but a really, really, really tiny one-shot kill range. You had to be really careful about how you used it, especially in a game as campy as Modern Warfare. It was a gun built for aggressive, confident players who were going to make very few mistakes, so naturally, hardly anybody was actually using the gun online, but every once in a while, you would see somebody confidently running into every gunfight like this like they were John Wayne, and it was one of the coolest things in COD history. Even in a game as bad as MW, this was cool. Now we arrive at the top 5. I saw some hate that I mentioned this in the shotgun video the other day. You guys are crazy. The KSG in Black Ops 2, this is one of the hardest shotguns in COD history to use. It's the first ever slug weapon put in a Call of Duty game, and I think it's the best to this day. The hitbox was really tiny, but the damage range was, I would call it almost unreasonably good. You could get one-shot kills from a long ways away. Fire rate was really fast since it was a shotgun, but you had to be really careful about which fights you took and when. If somebody ran up in your face, you still had to be sure that you were going to hit them with your first shot because they were going to punish you otherwise. But if you were good at snapping on targets and staying super consistent, this was it. Getting one-shot kill after one-shot kill was really satisfying. And I still think this gun has I think it's one of the best shotgun firing sounds in COD history. It was chunky every time you pulled the trigger. And number 4, the Trek 50 in Infinite Warfare. I want you to be honest. Raise your hand if you don't remember this gun existed. It was a single-shot sniper rifle similar to the Moors from AW, and it was added to IW a few months after the game came out. A lot of people missed the gun because they had already turned out and tuned out Infinite Warfare, but remember, sniping in Infinite Warfare was really hard on its own. So imagine you're trying to snipe in this game with a gun that was painfully slow with the fire rate, but an insta-kill regardless of where you hit the target. There were a few monsters out there who were dedicated. They put in the hours to getting good with the handling and taking full advantage of the sheer stopping power of the Trek, and I respect that. At number 3, the Ballista and BO2. You knew it was going to be here somewhere, up top. Bolt action sniper, silky smooth handling, solid fire rate, pretty good ammo capacity, really quick ADS animation, but all that was balanced out because you had a really small one-shot kill range that basically forced you to aim high if you were ever going to get successful with it. After the DSR was infamously nerfed, the Ballista became the popular gun of choice, the sniper, but it wasn't nearly as easy to use because of that one-shot kill range. So you either played slowly and cautiously with the DSR, or you forced yourself to get good at quickscoping and aggressive with the Ballista. And if you put in the time with the Ballista, you were a madman on the battlefield. The Ballista nuclear gameplays are some of the most iconic in COD history. I still have many, many memories watching Pomage dominate YouTube with this sniper. At number 2, the Locust in Black Ops 3. Your starting bolt-action sniper, which is wild. It was a gun that really showed us that COD sniping was about to change forever. Unlike previous snipers, Black Ops 3 bolt-actions had no aim assist on controllers, meaning you really had to get good with the mechanics, especially now that everybody could run on walls and use thruster packs. Sniping was harder than ever in Black Ops 3, but Treyarch threw the snipers a bone in the form of the Locust. This rifle had a super fast ADS animation, a ridiculous one-shot kill range, good fire rate, 10-round default mag. On paper, I think it was kind of broken, but it was still an extremely skill-based weapon because of the sheer difficulty of the sniping mechanics in this game. You weren't going to get any help from aim assist in Black Ops 3, and you had to be really good at predicting when your targets were going to jump on a wall, thrust out of the way, activate a specialist ability. There were so many moving parts in BO3 that it made it seem impossible to perform well with this, and yet there were people that did it. They were completely dedicated to getting good with this, and they showed it off to all their friends, and I respect those players. This was an amazing gun on paper, but in practice, it wasn't easy to use. And at number 1 today, I'm going to go with the Outlaw in Black Ops 4. Definitely the hardest sniper in COD history to use. Had the fastest fire rate of any bolt-action rifle in COD history, but it had the smallest one-shot kill range. Also had a pretty massive magazine, which was going to be helpful for players like me, because I needed 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 shots to drop somebody. But if you were good, and you were good at aiming, and you aimed high every time, the Outlaw had some of the most ridiculous potential of any sniper in a video game, especially in a game like Black Ops 4 where the health pools were huge and the average time to kill was long. I didn't play a lot of BO4, I'll admit that. But whenever a good Outlaw gameplay showed up on my YouTube or Twitter feed, I would stop and watch it. It was impressive. You absolutely had to be good with your aim to use this gun effectively, otherwise it would make you a sitting duck in every single engagement. If you want to see what I'm talking about, go look up old Pomage BO4 Outlaw videos. The potential of it was absurd, but you really had to be a good player to see that potential in action, which is what this video is about. If you weren't a decent sniper, you're just not going to be good with the Outlaw. If you load into a match of Black Ops 4 and saw someone on the other team running with it, you knew that you were going to have a rough time. There you have it, my friends. Be sure to check out Welcome to the Family. Pre-order that book if you guys want to get involved with me on my author journey, and I'll see you soon.